Inc. in Westport, featuring Joe Colbert. Serendipity Labs is a flexible workplace provider for anybody who doesn't know this. We are in 40 locations with memberships ranging from day passes at $49 to private offices up to 12 people for $10,000, for example. And the key to what we offer is that flexibility. At the end of this call, for anybody who's interested, we will be emailing a complimentary day pass to everybody to take advantage of a complimentary day office, a value of $69. Maxine will take care of that for you. Quick introduction for Joe. Joe Colbert has practiced business law for over 25 years and has been identified among the top attorneys in the tri-state area, with offices in New York and Connecticut, and thankfully here with us at Serendipity Labs. He is a general practitioner who focuses on the representation of organizations and individuals as general, corporate, and litigation counsel. Joe taught as an adjunct professor law for many years at various New York law schools and also serves as a mediator and arbitrator. I know he is an avid gardener, and every day for lunch, he brings a healthy salad from his own garden. That we know. He will regale you, I'm sure, with his stories. And as he'll say, to make a long story short, he never does. Happily, he's here with us, keeping Maxine and I entertained. And with that, Maxine will take over with some of the notes for the meeting.
Sure. Before we get started, I just want to let everyone know that they are muted as of now. Joe would like participants to feel free to interact and to raise their hand from the button at the bottom of your screen so we can unmute you so you can talk. There's also a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen where you can chat in any questions that will be answered at the end of the presentation. So Joe, I will hand it off to you now.
Great. So welcome everybody. We have about 8 participants. I taught at a law school level, and I always thought that interacting with the audience is a good idea because you came here for a reason. You're not required to be here. You probably have businesses of your own or in businesses and are concerned about personal liability. But that word, it's a kind of a lawyer word. And what I try to do is not use so much lawyer words and try to use lay people words. And I guess what I want to know is anybody a lawyer that's in the group? Because typically I would give this type of presentation to a group of lawyers. And we talk about all these lawyer concepts, but personal liability, it's for everybody, right? So if you have a small business, any business, you want to make sure that your personal assets are not exposed to someone who's looking to either collect from your business, do something to your business. You want to make sure that they're protected. You don't want to have to explain to your spouse, your significant other, why somebody's now coming after our house or our bank accounts. The other part of it is not just assets, because assets are easy, right? Money, house, jewelry, cars, any personal property. But there's the intangible, like your reputation, right? So if someone comes after you personally, even if you have no assets, it still affects your reputation. If you have no assets and you're not worried about your reputation, you still have the potential that somebody can come after you individually. So if you ever seen a caption in a lawsuit, your name in the caption, not just your business, and they can get a judgment against you. And that judgment may last for years. So even if you had no assets or your assets are protected some way, and we'll talk about that a little bit, you still have the threat of a judgment that would hang over you and your business perhaps for a long time. So we want to avoid all of that. And you're in business to make money, to do certain things. If you're a for-profit for money, non-for-profit, for whatever the purpose of the nonprofit is, you don't want to be personally liable. You don't want your assets, your reputation, potential debt hanging over you. So what are you going to do? Well, the first thing you might be able to do, we'll just talk about assets, and there's a variety of ways of protecting assets, right? So if you're in business and you're concerned you're in some sort of a risky business and you own a home, maybe you want to think about transferring the home into maybe your spouse's name, or in an LLC form, in a corporate form, which would be another layer of protection of your assets. Maybe in a trust. There's a variety of different ways you can do that. Goes the same for other assets that you may have, like cars, boats, whatever it is. Bank accounts, a little bit more difficult, but there are ways to potentially put them in a trust type of form, or if you have confidence in your spouse, maybe you don't want your name on it anymore. And again, these are ways that you can protect an asset. What you want to do is avoid personal liability from the get-go. And the first thing that I tell my clients is, look, there's no easy way. If you have a litigation, and if you heard about my background, I was trained originally as a litigator, a trial lawyer. I went after businesses, protected businesses in courts, but I'm also general counsel. But the benefit of my vision is when I look at a situation, I try to protect you from personal liability. I know what an adversary is going to look at in order to try to go after you personally. So as a corporate lawyer, we can prevent that from happening to the best of our ability. The first thing I tell my clients, do the right thing. If you have contracts, you abide by contracts. If you have laws that you're supposed to be following in your business, license agreements that you're supposed to be following, take a look at them. Know what your obligations are. If you do the right thing, then you're not going to have personal liability. Your business won't have liability. If you're not sure, and that's the issue, is when people aren't sure, you should ask your lawyer, ask the professionals who are specialized in that area. Maybe it's an accountant. Get professional advice. And after you get that advice, if you think that the advice is wrong or it's just not the right thing to do, then you can make a decision not to do it. But you have some grounds to protect you from that personal liability, protect your business, because most businesses in most states are allowed to rely on the professional advice. So you're allowed to rely on the advice of your counsel. It's a defense for you if someone's coming after you later on. But usually when you can sleep at night, you make good business decisions, you do the right thing, you can protect yourself from personal liability. But even if you do the right thing, people will still come after you. So if your business has a huge credit problem and the creditors are coming after you and the business has no assets, you can be certain that they're going to look to you personally and try to figure out, how am I going to go after that person personally for this obligation? And that's where this seminar comes in a little bit and helps you take a look at this from that mindset of, how can I protect myself from these people? Even if I'm doing the right thing, I think I did the right thing, I relied on my counsel or my accountant or my engineer or whatever the professional is, I protected all my assets, I still have this person who wants to come after me personally. Well, most of you, if you're in business and if you're a small business, you may have started off by forming a corporate entity around your business. And most lawyers will tell you, that's a good way to start a business, is have that insulation, that corporate form around you. We call it a veil. Right. So if you formed a limited liability company, and this is where I would like to know who you are and what type of businesses you have and whether you have this type of protection in place, because then I can focus it in to maybe help you in your particular circumstances and what might best help you. But in most cases, people either start a business and they don't do any corporate formation around them. There's no veil. And in those cases, you're totally exposed. So if someone has a problem and they want to come after you, they're going to go after you personally. So if you're a sole proprietorship, you haven't formed an LLC, you haven't formed a corporation around you, you're exposed. So what do you do in those cases? You don't want to go through the trouble of forming an LLC, or, I went to LegalZoom and I couldn't figure it out, or I can't afford a lawyer right now. The best bet for you is do the right thing, but also look into insurance. Insurance, whether you're an LLC, a corporation, something else, getting insurance to protect your business is one of the best things you're going to do. You should afford to do it. It should be part of your budget. And you should, in most cases, nobody should be in business without a business form of insurance to protect you that will cover you in the event that somebody comes after you. Now, there's always exceptions in the insurance policies. And sometimes, and depending on the type of insurance you get, some of them will cover and provide you with defense and protection. Some will only cover you up to a certain amount of money. Some will exclude certain acts, willful acts. It won't cover certain things automatically. Some states don't allow insurance to cover certain things. So in those instances, the insurance is helpful. It's something you should have, assuming you're insurable. You can be insured, and you go about it that way. In most instances, you're going to form an LLC. Small businesses, that's how they form. If you believe that your business is going to sell shares and have different layers of funding and have different types of shareholders and classes of shareholders, then you move into forming a corporation. In many states, forming a corporation is more involved, more expensive. Sometimes you don't want to go down that road, particularly if you don't know if your business is going to be viable and succeed. So you start with an LLC. And a lot of people don't go to a lawyer. They'll go to LegalZoom, or they'll go to Secretary of State and do the filings themselves. And they file these documents, these articles of incorporation and certificates of incorporation in some states, and then they form. And the ones that I'm going to focus a little bit on today are Connecticut and Delaware, because those seem to be the states. And tell me whether or not there's other states that we're in.
Okay, Joe, we do have a few questions that are lined up. Can you see them?
I can't. I'm not sure how you get them. I guess I press Q&A. I work at a nonprofit as an independent contractor, and I'm worried. You work as an independent contractor, and I'm worried that as I do things like promote events, especially in this environment, I can be liable. Well, if you're an independent contractor, then you should have a contract with that entity. And in that contract, you can protect yourself in certain ways with certain provisions, indemnifications. And again, it depends on what type of work you're doing and what the nonprofit's willing to give you. But if you're an independent contractor, you're not going to be covered under the independent, the employer, not the employer, the nonprofits, what the nonprofit is doing. So you're going to have to protect yourself as an independent contractor, and there's certain ways that you can do that. We can talk about that a little bit, or if you want to talk about that offline, I'm happy to have a conversation with you. But yeah, you should be worried about that, and there are ways that you can protect yourself in that contract that you have with the nonprofit.
And Joe, we just have one other chat that came through. It says,
Okay.
Hi, Mr. Colbert. I am not a lawyer. However, I formed an LLC on my own just under a couple of years ago. I feel I am operating within my corporate veil, but I want to be sure considering I'm handling the LLC on my own.
Right. Can you just tell me, the person who said that, what state you're in? What state you incorporated in? And so most business.
Connecticut, Joe, just so you know.
Right. So most small businesses will form an LLC, and they'll go to their home state. They didn't think through, okay, what do I have to do in terms of requirements, and is Connecticut the best place for me, or is Delaware the place for me? Some will just incorporate in Delaware, thinking that that's a good idea, but then they don't realize that if you get sued, you have to deal with Delaware and go down in Delaware and get a Delaware lawyer. And so there's a lot of different, considerations that go into what type of where do you form your LLC? Do you form a corporation? There's other types of entities that you can form around you. The biggest problem that I see with people, and this is the person who asked the question, an LLC is formed. People get the papers and then they stick it in their file cabinet and they collect dust. And people operate in such a way where they're not satisfying the corporate formalities. So what does a Connecticut LLC have to do? And that's where I was going to pull up some of these screens just to show you an example of the complexity of some of this stuff. Let's see if I could do this. And it's just a picture of, hopefully you could see this. This is the Connecticut LLC statute. It's part of it. And it's just one of the provisions that talk about what LLC members can see. And a lot of times people think LLCs don't have to keep records, for example, and they don't know what type of records that they have to keep. But these type of provisions exist in almost every state's LLC laws. And it talks about what, duties to furnish, what do you have to show other people who may be members in that LLC. And the person who raised the concern, their Connecticut LLC, you're a single member LLC. So right now you have no other members in your LLC. You formed it and that's it. But if you had more than yourself as a member, you would have to show other members certain things, and they're very generally worded. And the reading is, these are the type of documents that you have to keep and be mindful of when you're an LLC. So for example, it says they shall furnish each member without demand any information concerning the company's activities, affairs, financial condition, and other circumstances. And I'm not going to go through all these provisions and statutes. There's another one for Delaware that I had here, which, if you're interested in seeing it, it does exist. And it says something different. And if you were in New York, it says something different, and so on and so forth. The veil that you're talking about, or I'm using the word that we use, both of us used, it comes with the corporate form, but unless you start acting like an LLC and a corporation, you're going to lose that veil. If somebody comes after you, they're going to ask, okay, where are your records? Did you keep those financial records? Did you keep the accounting records? Where'd you keep them? I kept them in my bedroom. Do you have a separate office? Do you look and feel like a corporation? And you know what that means. You have to take a hard look at your business, and this goes to the Connecticut LLC person, and say, okay, am I operating in such a way where when somebody comes and takes a look at me, are they going to think that I'm a corporation, I'm a business that's separate from my person, or are they going to think that this is me running the business? Now, when you have multiple people in the business, it looks like more of a business. When you're operating it by yourself, it looks more like a hobby. It looks like it's what we call that you're the alter ego, right? The alternate self of the business. So they're one and the same. And if somebody can establish that, they can, what we call, pierce the corporate veil. So that veil that you get from being a corporation, we try to pull it down if you're on the other side looking in and trying to go after your personal assets. So you want to act like an LLC. So what does that mean? Well, most LLCs should have an operating agreement. And if you have one, that's great. And in all likelihood, if you're small and you did this yourself, you may not have one. And what the operating agreement does is it tells you how you're operating the business and how it should be operated. And if you're a single member LLC, meaning you're the only person in the business, well, it sounds kind of foolish. Well, why do I have to tell myself how I'm going to be operating this business? Well, the reason why you should have an operating agreement is for the purpose of preventing someone from saying you're not operating as a business. You're not looking at this as a business. You're operating this as a person. And so having an operating agreement is important. The other problem is people have operating agreements drawn up and then they don't follow them. So the operating agreement may say, There's supposed to be member meetings annually, or there's a board, and the board's supposed to meet. That there's voting that should happen, and then they don't do any of these things, and it happens all the time. In smaller organizations, mid-sized organizations, they don't follow the law. They don't follow the rules that they've even set up for themselves. And the more you document, the pain that you suffer today in documenting and making sure things are done according to the law and according to your organizational documents, the better you're going to be off later. It's going to take some time. There are applications which help you, and we can point you to those. But you should definitely be operating like a business within your organizational documents and the law. And what do I mean? Well, there's a lot of laws, right? So if the laws say that in your particular state, you have to have an annual meeting of members, you should have it. Even a single member LLC, you should have a meeting with yourself. You write a little set of minutes of the meeting, and then you put it in a folder, so that when somebody comes questioning whether or not there's a veil over this corporation, you have this to show them. Other things, credit cards. I've seen so many times where people are running their businesses and they're using their personal credit cards, they're using their business credit cards, mixing everything up. If you have a business and you have an LLC or corporation, have a corporate card. Have the bills come to the corporate address. Have the expenses paid on the corporate card. Don't pay them on your personal card, because if I'm deposing you and I'm trying to pierce the corporate veil, that's one of the things I'm going to ask you. How are these business expenses being paid? Do you have a personal card? Do you use the personal card for business? Do you have documents, records? How are you paying for the credit card? Is the money being paid out of a bank account that is a personal bank account? Bank accounts, that's one of the big issues. People don't set up a corporate bank account. I'm kind of curious, just say the person who asked about the Connecticut LLC, do you have a separate business banking account for your business? Do you have it? In order to do that, you need an employee identification number. Even if you don't have employees, get an EIN number. It's very easy. Go to the IRS site. You put in the name of your business. You say that you're a single member LLC. They'll issue you an EIN number. You look like a business. If I ask you at a deposition, do you have an EIN number? You'll be able to say, yes, sure, I do, Mr. Colbert. And you'll look and feel more like a business. It's one less way that I have to pierce your corporate veil. Serendipity, offices. Are you operating out of your home? Do you use them for a virtual address? Setting up even a virtual address is better than having no business address. And I'm assuming that everybody who's listening today has, at the very least, set up a business presence with a business address. If you have an office, it's even better for purposes of keeping that veil in place. Because when I ask you, whether your bedroom is your office, your office, you're going to be able to answer that question. And, with this pandemic and quarantining, it hopefully won't last forever. I know people are working at home and there's explanations, but in most cases, people still have that business office. Things may change a little bit, but we don't know. But if you have that business office, a mailing address for the business, that's something that will help show that you're operating this as a business. It's not intermingled with your personal. I see a bunch of questions. I don't know whether, okay. You have an EIN, great. That's fantastic. So, so some people have taken the right steps in terms of operating, and like this one person mentioned, they have separate bank accounts, they have an EIN number, they have an operating agreement. When you sign your leases, When you sign your agreements, how do you sign the agreements? Do you sign them as a corporate officer of your business, or are you signing them personally? Are you personally guaranteeing your obligations? Because if you're personally guaranteeing your obligations, then what that means is you have personal liability. So for example, you sign a lease and it's for the business. You put the business's name on it. And then you sign a personal guarantee of the business's obligation. Well, your personal assets are now on the line. So avoid personal guarantees to the extent that you can negotiate them out of a particular deal. Your business contracts in particular, they ought to always have the signature of the corporation. So you should never be signing something as a person if you can avoid it. Sign on behalf of the corporation as a corporate officer. You can have a resolution made up for you. You can make a resolution that says that you're authorized to sign on behalf of the entity. All of these different things help you show the world that you're operating as a business, that this is not Joe Colbert's business. This is the business of LLC or the business of corporation. I mentioned that I glossed over minutes, notices of meetings, voting, anything where you can create a document that makes you look like you're operating a business. And particularly if you're required to create that document, then you should. So if the law says you're supposed to be having annual meetings, well, then you should have a notice of meeting, you should have meeting documents, and then you should have meeting minutes. You may even have a resolution of the membership to do certain things like, for example, sign a lease. These type of documents, if you can create them and keep them in a file, it could be electronic or paper. Nowadays, almost everything is electronic. You're going to be better for it. Do you have letterhead for the business? Your email. I got to tell you how many people who are running businesses that I represent who still use Gmail, Opt Online, AOL, Hotmail for their business addresses. A lot of lawyers do that too. What's that telling you if you were the lawyer on the other side about how they're running their business? Their Gmail that they're using, is it the same as their personal email? When they write their email, do you have a legend that gives your business name, your title, your business phone numbers, another issue, cell phones. People use cell phones. They don't want to pay for a business phone, so they're using their personal cell phone for their business number. Again, what does it tell you? It tells you that it's them operating as a person rather than as a business, a separate business. So again, it's just you pile on these different issues, and if you have enough, the balancing is going to be in one way or the other. So you should take a look at that. Excuse me. So does that mean that my business signs leases in my management capacity rather than me? I don't understand the question, but I think I understand the question, but I'm not sure. So if a business signs a lease, then the business is responsible for the lease, unless there's some personal liability. So if you, again, we're talking about that now. How does somebody so for example, you sign a lease for an office space and you sign in the name of your business, and the business is liable on that lease. You're not personally liable if you're signing as a corporate officer of your business. So you're a corporation, you're an LLC, and you sign as the managing member of the LLC. You don't sign a personal guarantee. You don't pay your lease, or you breach the lease in a certain way, and the landlord wants to come after you, either to get paid or to terminate your lease or get you to do something under the lease term. The landlord can try to pierce the corporate veil, or it can go after the business. So that's another thing to look at, which is what type of assets do you have in your business? So you had to fund your business. with something, right? So your business has money or is generating money in most cases. The landlord will look to the monies of the business, but it won't be able to go past that and go to your personal assets. So that's what we're talking about now, is personal liability as opposed to business liability. So the landlord may ask you to sign a personal guarantee of that obligation if you're a corporation, and that would be smart for the landlord to do, because then it wouldn't have to try to pierce the corporate veil. It would just have you personally responsible for the obligations of the business. So if the business, for example, files bankruptcy protection, they could still go after the individual for the obligation on the lease or the agreement, and this could be any kind of an agreement. In terms of funding the business, that's another thing that people look at, like me, trying to go after and pierce the corporate veil. Are you treating this as a business? Is there capital in the business? Is the business just the business checking account? Is it just operating as a slush account? So, you make $1,000, the $1,000 goes into your pocket. You make a $10,000, $9,000 goes into your pocket, or are you reinvesting in the business? Is money being spent by the business for the business, or is this business really just an extension of you? Are you the alter ego of the business? Is this really just Joe Colbert operating a business, or is this really a business? So that's something that they would look at. So you should look at how your business is funded. It should have funds. You should leave money in your business, unless you're looking to protect the business assets. But if you're looking to protect your personal assets, the business should have funding and have funds. Your website. A lot of people set up websites and then they forget about their terms and conditions. I've seen many. I've actually looked at a few people's websites that are connected with Serendipity, and they're LLCs or they're corporations, but then on their website at the bottom, they don't put LLC or corporation. They just put the name of the business. Well, why would they not want to tell the world that they're this corporate entity? And maybe it's the way it looks, the way it feels, but in the end, if you think that that's important, then go for it. But if the reason why you're a corporation or LLC is to protect the owners from personal liability, then why not tell the world that you're an LLC or corporation? So again, I've looked at a couple of the businesses that are connected with Serendipity, and I've even seen their websites, fairly large entities too, and they just don't pronounce that to the world, which I think that they should. Look at your terms and conditions, see what they say. Make sure that, people, if you're an online business where you're selling goods online on your website, make sure your terms and conditions are solid, where there's no room for the world to come after you personally. And one, you should be protecting your business with them, but also insulating the ownership. What you say and to the world on your website and your marketing, is this you marketing or is this the business? These are type of things that we can look at in order to determine, is this veil around you a good veil? Business cards, have them, letterhead, emails, telephone, credit cards, websites, this all adds up. Having separate bank accounts. On your checks, do you have your business name? When you sign your checks, you sign your checks. Are you signing your checks? And then sometimes you can sign them as a corporate officer, depending on, the checks. In most cases, you're just signing your name. But whatever you're doing, if there's an invoice that you're paying, was the invoice to you personally or was it to your business? You should get your vendors accustomed to billing you as a business, not as a person. If you have employees or if you're paying people like the independent contractors, are you paying them out of your personal accounts or just the business accounts? Are they personal relationships or are they business relationships? Are you paying your landscaper with your business account? And these are the type of things that we would look at if we were trying to go after you and trying to get at you personally. Paychecks. So if you're paying someone as an employee, it should come out of the business account. They shouldn't be, I'm going to write you a personal check this week because the business doesn't have any money in its account. Everything should be through the business. I'm seeing some other statements. How do capital contributions work? Is there a practice that protects personal liability? Capital contributions work. Well, every business needs capital. So if there's a capital, I'm not sure what the question is, but if people are contributing capital to the business, your operating agreement should provide for how that capital contribution is made. If it depends on the entity too. I'm not sure how it connects to personal liability. So if you're making a loan to the business, there should be a loan agreement. If you're making a capital contribution to your own business, then that should be recorded somewhere. There should be an accounting entry. This is the stock book, right? So if you have a stock corporation and you never issued, you got this nice little pretty stock book at a LegalZoom or from your lawyer, but you never issued the actual shares, that shows that the business is not being run formally. That's not a good practice. You should have the stock book updated when stocks change. So if they're sold or however they're operated or dealt with, there should be a record of it. Good record keeping will help you later. And it's become so much easier to record keep nowadays electronically. So the paper is no longer the primary way that we look at things. We look at the electronic and then see how businesses are being run. Let's see if that gets any. So if you're adding capital to a business and it's your own business, there should be a record of it. So you should keep your business funded. I think that was my point. So it shouldn't be that you're just keep on using your personal assets and then adding it and then subtracting it. The business should be properly funded, and that will establish more of a veil to the business. If it's a loan to the business, so if you have if there's more than just you running the business and you're making a loan to business, there should be loan documents. There should be a note by the business, and it'll show one, it shows that the business is formally being run. You'll be protected in terms of the assets that you're adding to the business. Okay. Do you have a sample independent contractor contract, or what's the best way to figure it out? Many nonprofits aren't sophisticated. Like I said, I think that you should just contact me, and I'm not going to charge you for it, but we can have a conversation, a little bit more detail about what's going on. Because a lot of times people think, and this is the problem with the LegalZooms, take a look at what you did when you formed your businesses and what documents you used. And, maybe you thought going to Connecticut and forming a Connecticut LLC was the best move, but maybe it's not the best move now that you're thinking about it. And pull out those documents, pull out the organizational documents, make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. If you don't have an operating agreement, for example, get one. Make sure you follow it. If there's laws that you should be following, make sure you're following them. There's no time like the present to get these things done. You don't want to be looking back and then trying to figure it out later. So this is how you should be operating your business, and if you do that, I think you'll be better for it. What I did was create just a couple page reminder. I called it like the 14 steps of avoiding personnel liability for your business, and most of the stuff is covered that I just mentioned is covered in there. And I'm happy to provide that. I guess with Serendipity, they'll send you an email, and I'm happy for them to provide that to you. Don't consider this legal advice. And I think that this is where I was going before, which is a lot of times people form these businesses and, these LegalZooms happen. They don't get advice, and you kind of travel blind with this. And it's almost like construction for me. I'm pretty handy, but I know my limitations, and certainly I don't want to build a house. I wouldn't be able to do that. It would probably fall down. And what I'm trying to hopefully do for you is avoid your businesses getting you into trouble. I'm sure that you're doing well, or you're trying to do well, and you've done the best you can in terms of, going out there, forming the entity. Well, now act like the entity. Make sure you're acting like the entity. Try to follow some of these helpful hints. If you don't have the things that I mentioned, there's no reason why you shouldn't go out and go do it now. And then try to get some advice. And I think with that, I covered everything that I wanted to cover. I'm not sure if anybody else has any questions. I wanted this to be more interactive, only because I don't know who you are other than the one or two people who popped in with questions. Feel free to contact me. You know, if you'd like to talk, I won't charge you for the time. I know lawyers tend to charge for every minute that they spend. But I'm happy to talk you through any kind of personal issues you might have and see whether or not I can get you heading in the right direction. And I think that's good.
Thank him.
Thank me.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. That was fantastic. We hope everybody enjoyed that and maybe gained something from it. I always enjoy it. So we do.
Does anyone have any other questions? We will be sending a follow-up email with Joe's contact information if you'd like to reach out to him, as well as the complimentary day pass. So that will be coming by tomorrow. So if anyone didn't have a chance to ask a question they wanted to ask, you'll be able to do that following this presentation. Okay.
Okay. Have a good day and stay safe, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you.
Thanks, everyone, for joining. Have a great day.